Years stretched into decades, and the galaxy slowly transformed. The fall of the Scytherian Empire paved the way for a new era, one defined by cooperation rather than conquest. Humanity, once on the brink of extinction, found its place among the stars, forging alliances with other species who had also suffered under the Empire's rule. Together, they built a fragile but hopeful peace, vowing never to repeat the mistakes of the past. Laura became a symbol of resilience and wisdom. Her work on ethical technology earned her recognition across star systems, and she traveled often, speaking at conferences and advising leaders on how to balance progress with responsibility. Though she still bore the physical and emotional scars of wielding the Reckoner, she carried herself with quiet strength, inspiring others to seek solutions that didn't rely on destruction. Power is a tool, she would say. It's up to us to decide whether it builds or breaks. Ryan, meanwhile, stepped away from leadership roles, choosing instead to live a simpler life. He settled on a quiet farming colony, where he spent his days tending to crops and mentoring young settlers. He rarely spoke about the war, preferring to focus on nurturing the next generation. Yet those who knew him understood the depth of his sacrifice. His hands, calloused from years of hard work, were a testament to the belief that true strength lay in rebuilding what had been lost. Alina's writings gained widespread attention, though she remained reclusive. Her book, titled Fragments of the Forgotten Asterisk, became required reading for historians and philosophers alike. It was both a warning and a tribute, a reminder of humanity's darkest hour and a celebration of its ability to rise above despair. When asked why she chose to stay isolated, she replied simply, "Some stories are best told from a distance." The ruins of Haven 7 were eventually declared a memorial site, preserved as a reminder of the cost of survival. Visitors came from across the galaxy to pay their respects, leaving offerings of flowers and stones at the edge of the crater where the Reckoner had been destroyed. Few remembered the weapon itself, but the lessons it taught endured. That power unchecked could lead to ruin, and that courage sometimes meant walking away from temptation. One day, long after the war had faded into history, Laura stood at the edge of the crater, staring into its depths. Ryan joined her, his presence silent but comforting. They didn't need words. The bond they shared transcended language. After a while, Laura broke the silence. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Ryan smiled faintly. "We'll never know for sure. But I do know this. We gave people a chance to start over. That has to count for something." Alina arrived later, carrying a copy of her book. She placed it gently at the base of a makeshift monument etched with the names of those who had fallen. As she turned to leave, she paused and looked back at the crater. For a moment, she thought she saw a faint glow emanating from its center, like the ghost of the crystal calling out to her. Shaking her head, she dismissed it as imagination and walked away. In the end, the story of the Reckoner became more than a tale of survival. It became a lesson about the choices that define civilizations. Humanity had faced its darkest hour armed with an ancient weapon capable of unimaginable destruction. And yet, when given the chance, they chose restraint over domination, healing over vengeance. It wasn't perfection, but it was progress. Under distant stars, the galaxy moved forward, shaped not by the weapons it wielded, but by the hope it carried. The strongest shield had fallen, and the oldest weapon had been laid to rest. What remained was the enduring promise of renewal, and the quiet determination to build a future worth fighting for. Months passed after the destruction of the Reckoner, and humanity began the slow process of rebuilding. The Scytherian Empire was no more, its vast fleet reduced to ashes by the weapon that had ultimately destroyed itself. Refugees who had escaped Haven 7 returned cautiously, piecing together what remained of their scattered colonies. New alliances formed among species once oppressed by the Scytherians, united by a shared desire for peace. But despite the victories, the scars of war lingered. Laura recovered slowly, her body bearing the physical toll of channeling the Reckoner's energy. Her hands still trembled occasionally, and she often woke in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, haunted by visions of collapsing stars and crumbling worlds. Yet she refused to let herself be consumed by guilt or fear. Instead, she dedicated her days to studying the ethical implications of advanced technology, determined to ensure that humanity would never again create something so dangerous. Ryan stayed by her side during her recovery. Though he too carried his own burdens, he had lost count of the lives sacrificed in the final battle, including many friends and comrades. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on him, but he found solace in helping others rebuild. Together with Laura, he worked to establish new settlements, prioritizing safety and cooperation over aggression. It wasn't easy. Resources were scarce, and tensions ran high, but they persisted, driven by hope for a better future. Elena took a different path. After returning from the moon, she secluded herself in a small research station, poring over the data collected during their encounter with the Reckoner. She wrote extensively about the experience, documenting every detail while deliberately omitting specifics about how the weapon functioned. Her goal was clear: to preserve the lessons learned without tempting future generations to recreate such a tool. When asked why she chose this solitary life, she simply replied, "Some truths are too dangerous to share." Despite the progress, not everyone agreed on how to move forward. Debates raged across human colonies about whether using the Reckoner had been justified. Some hailed it as a necessary act of survival, while others condemned it as reckless and immoral. Laura often found herself at the center of these discussions, defending her decision to activate the weapon. "We didn't have a choice," she would argue. "But we must learn from our mistakes. The cost of power is too great if it means losing ourselves." In time, stories of the Reckoner faded into legend. Parents told their children tales of an ancient weapon capable of reshaping reality, warning them of the dangers of hubris. Few believed the stories were true, dismissing them as myths meant to teach caution. And perhaps that was for the best. Humanity needed to heal, to focus on unity rather than destruction. One evening, as the three survivors gathered around a campfire under a starry sky, Laura broke the silence. "Do you think we'll ever forget?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the crackling flames. Ryan shook his head. "No, and we shouldn't. Remembering keeps us grounded." Elena nodded in agreement. "The past shapes us, but it doesn't define us. We decide what comes next." As they sat there, watching the fire dance against the darkness, a sense of quiet resolve settled over them. They had faced the worst of humanity's potential: the greed, the violence, the willingness to sacrifice everything for survival, and emerged changed. Though the road ahead would be difficult, they knew one thing for certain: the galaxy's strongest shield had fallen, and with it, the temptation of one ancient human weapon. What rose in its place was not just survival, but the fragile hope of a brighter tomorrow. The destruction of the Reckoner was no easy task. Its core resisted every attempt to dismantle it, as if it had a will of its own. Laura, despite her weakened state, guided Ryan and Elena through the process, her knowledge of the crystal's mechanics proving invaluable. They worked quickly, knowing that leaving the weapon intact, even for a moment, was too dangerous. Each pulse of energy from the crystal reminded them of its potential for destruction. "We need to overload it," Laura said, her voice hoarse but determined. "If we can't take it apart, we'll have to burn it out. It's the only way." Ryan nodded, his hand steady as he followed her instructions. "What happens when we do that?" "It'll self-destruct," Laura replied grimly. "And it might take this whole outpost with it. We need to get as far away as possible once we start." Elena glanced at the crystal, her expression conflicted. "Are you sure this is the right thing to do? What if we need it again someday?" Laura shook her head firmly. "No, this isn't a weapon. It's a monster. If we keep it around, someone else will try to use it. And next time, it might not end like this." With a heavy heart, Elena agreed. Together, they rigged the crystal with makeshift charges, using every scrap of explosive material they could find. The plan was simple: trigger an overload in the core, and evacuate before the resulting explosion consumed everything. But time was against them. The outpost was already crumbling from the earlier battle, and the strain of the Reckoner's activation had destabilized the ground beneath their feet. As they prepared to leave, Laura paused, staring at the crystal one last time. Her body ached, and her mind felt foggy, but she couldn't shake the connection she'd formed with it. She had given a part of herself to control its power, and now it felt like severing that bond would leave a void she might never fill. "Let's go," Ryan urged, gripping her arm gently. "We've done what we can. It's time to get out of here." Laura nodded, tearing her gaze away from the crystal. "You're right. Let's move." The trio hurried out of the command center, climbing over debris and dodging falling chunks of the ceiling. The outpost groaned around them, its structure on the verge of collapse. Outside, the landscape was scared and barren, marked by the aftermath of the Reckoner's fury. They made their way to a nearby ridge, putting as much distance between themselves and the crystal as possible. When they reached safety, Laura activated the detonation sequence remotely. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low rumble echoed through the air, growing louder and more intense. The ground shook violently, and a blinding flash of light erupted from the ruins of Haven 7. The explosion was massive, sending shockwaves rippling across the terrain and obliterating everything in its path. Ryan shielded his eyes, turning away from the blast. When he looked back, all that remained of the outpost, and the Reckoner, was a smoldering crater. The weapon that had saved them was gone, erased from existence. For a long while, none of them spoke. They simply stood there, watching the smoke rise into the sky. The weight of what they had done, and what they had lost, hung heavily over them. "We did the right thing," Alina finally said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, but resolute. "It's over." Laura nodded, though her face was pale and drawn. "Yeah, it's over." Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. "You saved us, Laura. All of us. Don't forget that." She managed a faint smile, though her eyes were filled with exhaustion. "I just hope it was worth it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the desolate moon, the three survivors began the long journey back to the evacuation ships. They carried with them the scars of their ordeal, not just physical wounds, but memories of the choices they had made and the sacrifices they had endured. The galaxy was safe, for now, but they knew the cost of victory would stay with them forever. Behind them, the crater glowed faintly, a silent reminder of the power humanity had unleashed and the lengths they had gone to ensure it would never be used again. The moment Laura activated the Reckoner, the crystal erupted in a blinding flash of light. Its energy surged outward, filling the room with an intense hum that vibrated through every surface. Laura's body stiffened as the power coursed through her hands trembling against the glowing core. She felt like she was being pulled apart and stitched back together all at once, her mind flooded with images of stars collapsing, planets shattering, and entire civilizations vanishing into nothingness. Outside, the Exitherian fleet paused mid-attack, their sensors overwhelmed by the sudden surge of energy. The quantum aegis surrounding their flagship flickered for the first time ever, its impenetrable barrier wavering under the force of the Reckoner. The Exitherians scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The weapon wasn't just attacking, it was rewriting the rules of reality itself. Ryan and Alina stood on a ridge overlooking the outpost, shielding their eyes from the brilliance of the light. The ground beneath them shook violently, cracks spreading across the barren landscape. "It's working," Alina whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of energy. But her relief was short-lived. She could see the toll it was taking on Laura, even from a distance. Through the windows of the command center, they watched her collapse to her knees, her body racked with pain. "She can't hold it much longer," Ryan said, his voice tight with fear. He wanted to run back inside, to drag Laura away from the crystal before it consumed her completely. But he knew it was impossible. If she let go now, the Reckoner would spiral out of control, destroying everything, including them. Inside the command center, Laura fought to maintain her grip on the crystal. Her vision blurred, and her thoughts became fragmented, but she refused to give up. She focused on the faces of everyone who had trusted her, the civilians who had escaped, the team who had stayed behind, and Ryan, who had always believed in her. She thought about Earth, about the billions of lives depending on her to make this sacrifice. "I'm sorry," she murmured, tears streaming down her face. Then, with one final effort, she channeled all of her remaining strength into the crystal, stabilizing its output. The light intensified, pulsing outward in waves that rippled across the battlefield. The Exetherian ships began to disintegrate, their molecular structures unraveling under the Reckoner's influence. One by one, they broke apart, reduced to clouds of dust and debris. Even the flagship, protected by the quantum aegis, couldn't withstand the onslaught. The shield collapsed entirely, and the massive vessel imploded in a silent burst of energy. As the last of the enemy fleet disappeared, the Reckoner's power began to wane. The light dimmed, and the shaking stopped. Exhausted and broken, Laura slumped forward, her hands slipping off the crystal. For a moment, there was silence, a fragile, eerie calm. Ryan rushed into the command center. Elena closed behind him. They found Laura lying motionless on the floor, her breathing shallow but steady. Her skin was pale, and her body bore signs of immense strain, but she was alive. "Laura." Ryan knelt beside her, cradling her head in his arms. "Can you hear me?" She opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the dim light. "Did it work?" she asked weakly. Ryan nodded, his voice choked with emotion. "You did it. You stopped them." Elena looked around at the devastation, the ruins of Haven 7, the scorched landscape, and the empty skies where the Exetherian fleet had been moments earlier. "We won," she said quietly, though her tone carried no joy. "But at what cost?" Laura tried to sit up, wincing in pain. "I'll be okay," she assured them, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. "But we need to shut this thing down. Now, before it does any more damage." Ryan helped her to her feet, supporting her as they approached the crystal. Its glow had faded significantly, but it still pulsed faintly, as if waiting for its next command. Elena placed her hand on its surface, feeling the residual energy tingling against her palm. "It's alive," she said softly. "And it's hungry. We can't let anyone use it again." Laura nodded. "Then we destroy it. Completely." Together, the three of them worked to dismantle the Reckoner, ensuring that its power could never be unleashed again. As they did, they couldn't help but wonder how many secrets and dangers still lingered in the galaxy, hidden in the shadows of humanity's forgotten past. The evacuation was almost complete. The last of the civilians boarded the escape shuttles, their faces pale with fear, but filled with gratitude for the small group staying behind. Ryan, Laura, and Elena watched as the ships lifted off, disappearing into the dark expanse of space. They knew it might be the last time they saw those people, or anyone at all. Inside the command center, the air was thick with tension. The Exetherian attacks had grown more intense, their weapons pounding relentlessly against the Reckoner's shield. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls, and sparks flew from damaged consoles. The outpost was falling apart around them, but Elena refused to let go of the crystal. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her hands resting on its glowing surface, sweat dripping down her face. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but she kept pushing herself, channeling every ounce of energy she had into maintaining the barrier. "We can't keep this up," Ryan said, his voice tight with frustration. "Elena's going to collapse if we don't act soon." Laura glanced at him, her expression grim. "If she collapses, so does the shield. And then we're dead." Ryan clenched his fists, pacing back and forth. "There has to be another way. We can't just throw our lives away like this." Elena opened her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not about us anymore. It's about everyone else. The people who escaped, the ones counting on us to hold the line. If we don't stop the Exotherians here, they'll hunt them down. This is the only chance we have." Ryan stopped pacing and looked at her, his shoulders slumping. He wanted to argue, to tell her there was still hope for survival, but he couldn't deny the truth in her words. They were out of options. The Exotherians were too powerful, their technology unmatched. Without the Reckoner, humanity didn't stand a chance. "I'm staying," Laura said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her tone left no room for debate. "If we're going to use this thing, I'm the one who should guide it. I understand how it works better than anyone else." "No," Ryan snapped, stepping toward her. "You've done enough. You've risked your life for all of us already. Let me take your place." "You can't," Laura replied firmly. "This isn't just about bravery. It's about skill. You know that. I'm the only one who can stabilize the crystal when it reaches full power." She turned to Elena, her voice softening. "And she's already done far more than anyone could ask. It's my turn now." Elena tried to protest, but her words caught in her throat. She was too weak to argue, too drained to fight back. Deep down, she knew Laura was right. Activating the Reckoner required someone with technical expertise, someone who could control its overwhelming energy. And Laura was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. Ryan stared at both women, his heart heavy with guilt and anger. "Fine," he finally said, his voice cracking. "But I'm not leaving you. If this is the end, we face it together." Laura nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you." As the Exotherian bombardment intensified, the trio prepared for what came next. Laura took over from Elena, placing her hands on the crystal. Immediately, she felt its power surge through her, raw and uncontrollable. It was like trying to hold back a tidal wave with bare hands. She gritted her teeth, focusing every bit of her concentration on stabilizing the flow of energy. Elena staggered to her feet, leaning on Ryan for support. "We need to get to higher ground," she said weakly. "When the Reckoner activates fully, it's going to be big." Ryan helped her toward the exit, glancing back at Laura one last time. "Be careful," he called out. "I will," Laura replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Now go. Trust me." Outside, the Exotherian flagship loomed closer, its quantum aegis gleaming under the dim light of the distant sun. The enemy fleet surrounded Haven 7, preparing for the final strike. Inside the outpost, Laura closed her eyes, letting the crystal's energy consume her. She whispered a silent apology to everyone she loved, knowing this was the only way to save them. Then, with a deep breath, she activated the Reckoner. The Exotherians didn't waste time. Within hours, their reinforcements arrived, massive cruisers and swarms of drones that filled the sky above Haven 7. The outpost's defenses had never been strong, but now they were completely overwhelmed. The quantum aegis surrounding the enemy flagship loomed like an impenetrable wall, a constant reminder of humanity's helplessness. Even with the Reckoner's temporary shield protecting them, everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the Exotherians broke through. Ryan stood in the command center, his jaw clenched as he watched the screens showing the growing fleet. "They're testing us," he muttered to Laura, who was monitoring the energy readings from the crystal. "They know we've got something new, and they're trying to figure out how far they can push us." Laura nodded grimly. "The shield is holding, for now. But if they bring in more ships or start targeting specific areas, we won't last long." Elena's connection to the Reckoner is keeping it stable, but she's reaching her limit. Elena sat nearby, her hands trembling as she focused on maintaining the barrier. Sweat dripped down her face, and her breathing was shallow. She could feel the weight of the crystal pressing against her mind, its power both intoxicating and suffocating. Every pulse of energy drained her further, leaving her weaker with each passing minute. But she couldn't stop. If she let go, even for a second, the shield would collapse, and the Exotherians would destroy them all. "We need to evacuate," Ryan said suddenly, turning to Laura. "If we stay here, we'll lose everything. Everyone." "No," Laura shot back sharply. "If we run, they'll chase us down. This is our last stand, Ryan. You know that." Ryan hesitated, torn between survival and sacrifice. He glanced at Alina, whose eyes were closed in concentration, her body visibly shaking. "She can't keep this up forever. There has to be another way." "There isn't," Alina whispered, opening her eyes. Her voice was weak but firm. "This is it. Either we fight, or we die running. At least this way, we have a chance." Ryan stared at her, his chest tightening. He wanted to argue, to find some other solution, but deep down, he knew she was right. They had no options left. With a heavy sigh, he made his decision. "Prepare the civilians for evacuation. Get as many people out as you can. I'll stay behind with a small team to hold the line." Laura shook her head fiercely. "You can't do this alone. We're staying too." Ryan opened his mouth to protest, but Alina cut him off. "She's right. We started this together, and we'll finish it together. Besides," she gave a faint, weary smile, "I'm not done with the Reckoner yet." As the evacuation began, chaos erupted throughout the outpost. Families packed what little they could carry, tears streaming down their faces as they said goodbye to loved ones. Some refused to leave, determined to stay and fight, but Ryan ordered his soldiers to escort them onto the escape shuttles. It was painful, watching so many people flee, knowing that some might not make it to safety. But it was the only way to give humanity a fighting chance. Meanwhile, the Exatherians launched their full assault. Their weapons pounded against the Reckoner's shield, sending shockwaves through the outpost. The walls cracked, and debris rained down, but the barrier held firm. Alina gritted her teeth, pouring every ounce of strength she had into keeping it intact. Each blast felt like a hammer striking her skull, threatening to shatter her focus. She knew she couldn't last much longer. In the command center, Laura worked frantically to modify the crystal's output, hoping to amplify its power without overloading Alina. "I think I can reroute some of the energy," she said, typing furiously. "It might buy us a few more minutes." "Do it," Ryan replied, gripping the edge of the console as another explosion rocked the room. "And then get ready. Once the shield goes down, we'll need to hit them hard and fast." Outside, the Exatherian flagship loomed closer, its massive form casting a shadow over Haven 7. The quantum aegis shimmered ominously, daring anyone to challenge it. But inside the outpost, 3 people prepared to do just that, with nothing but determination, desperation, and an ancient weapon that could either save them or doom them all. The Reckoner's energy surged through the lab, filling the room with an intense, blinding light. Alina and Laura shielded their eyes, but they could still feel the heat radiating from the crystal. The air grew heavy, and a low hum vibrated through the walls, shaking the entire outpost. Outside, the Exatherian drones hesitated in their attack, their systems confused by the sudden burst of unfamiliar power. Alina focused on the images flashing in her mind. They came faster now. Blueprints, equations, and warnings written in ancient text. She saw hands working intricate controls, voices chanting commands, and faces twisted in pain as they struggled to control the weapon. Each vision brought clarity but also dread. The Reckoner wasn't just a tool. It was alive, feeding off whoever dared to wield it. "We need to stabilize it," Laura shouted over the noise, her fingers flying across the console. "If we don't contain this energy, it'll tear the outpost apart." Alina nodded, gritting her teeth. "I think I know how." She reached out and touched the crystal again, ignoring the sharp sting of electricity that shot up her arms. Her body felt like it was being pulled in 2 directions at once, stretched thin by forces she couldn't comprehend. But somehow, she managed to channel her thoughts into the crystal, guiding its chaotic energy toward a single purpose: defense. The light dimmed slightly, and the trembling stopped. For a moment, There was silence. Then the crystal let out a pulse of energy, so strong it sent both women stumbling backward. When they looked up, they saw that the walls of the lab were glowing faintly, as if infused with the same power. "What did you do?" Laura asked, her voice trembling. I think I activated some kind of barrier," Elena replied, struggling to catch her breath. "It's protecting us. For now." Outside, the Exetherian drones launched another assault, firing beams of energy at the outpost. But instead of breaking through, the attacks dissipated against the newly formed shield. The enemy ships circled overhead, clearly baffled by what had happened. For the first time since the invasion began, Haven 7 was safe, at least temporarily. Ryan rushed into the lab, his face pale with worry. "What's going on? Are you two okay?" "We're fine," Elena said, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. "But the Reckoner, it's not done yet. It's holding back for now, but I can feel it pushing against me. It wants more." "More," Ryan repeated, his brow furrowing. "More what?" "More power," Laura interjected. "And someone to direct it. Elena's acting as a conduit right now, but she can't keep this up forever. If we try to use the Reckoner against the Exetherians, we'll need a way to stabilize the connection, or risk losing control completely." Ryan glanced between the two women, his expression grim. "Then we figure it out. Fast, because those ships aren't going to wait around forever." As the team worked to understand the crystal's limits, Elena retreated into herself, trying to make sense of the visions still swirling in her mind. She saw glimpses of the past, humans experimenting with the Reckoner, desperate to create something that could protect them. But she also saw the cost: cities reduced to rubble, stars collapsing, and people screaming as reality itself unraveled around them. The weapon had been abandoned for a reason. It was too dangerous to control. Despite the warnings, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of options. The Exetherians wouldn't stop until humanity was wiped out. And if using the Reckoner meant sacrificing herself to save everyone else, then maybe it was worth it. Laura noticed the look on Elena's face and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this." Elena forced a small smile, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "I hope you're right." Unbeknownst to them, the Exetherians were already planning their next move. Their sensors had detected the activation of the Reckoner, and their leaders understood the threat it posed. Orders were sent to deploy their most advanced weapons, capable of overwhelming even the strongest shields. The battle for Haven 7 was far from over, and neither side was willing to back down. The team hurried back to their ship, the crystal safely secured in a containment unit. Elena kept glancing at it, her mind still reeling from the vision she'd experienced. The voice she'd heard, deep, cold, and unyielding, had left her shaken. She tried to push the memory aside, focusing instead on the task ahead. They had retrieved the core of the Reckoner, but now they needed to understand how it worked. And they needed to do it quickly. As the ship lifted off the moon's surface, Ryan called Haven 7 to report their success. "We've got it," he said into the communicator. "The core is intact, and we're heading back now." On the other end, Laura's voice came through, sharp with urgency. "Good, but listen carefully. I've been analyzing the data you sent earlier, and there's something you need to know. That crystal, it's not just a power source. It's alive, in a way. It responds to whoever holds it, but it also changes them." Ryan frowned. "What do you mean, changes them?" "I'm not sure yet," Laura admitted, "but the texts mention that anyone who uses the Reckoner has to merge with it, at least partially. It becomes part of them, and they become part of it. That's why it was abandoned. People couldn't handle the strain." Elena, overhearing the conversation, felt a chill run down her spine. She thought about the visions again, the destruction, the screaming, the voice warning her of consequences. Was this what Laura meant? Was using the Reckoner going to cost them more than they realized? Back at Haven 7, Preparations were already underway. Laura and her team worked tirelessly to set up a testing area for the crystal, rigging sensors and monitors to track its energy output. When the ship finally returned, Ryan and his crew handed over the containment unit with quiet solemnity. No one spoke as the crystal was carefully moved into the lab. Elena stayed close, watching as Laura began running diagnostics. The crystal pulsed faintly, reacting to the equipment around it. Its light shifted colors, almost like it was studying them in return. "This thing is incredible," Laura murmured, her eyes wide with awe. "It's rewriting physics just by existing. If we can harness this power, we might actually stand a chance against the Xetherians." "But at what cost?" Elena asked softly. "You said yourself, it changes people. What if we lose ourselves trying to use it?" Laura hesitated. "I don't have all the answers. But right now, we don't have a choice. If we don't stop the Xetherians, none of us will survive anyway." Before they could continue the discussion, alarms blared throughout the outpost. Someone shouted that Cytherian ships had been spotted nearby. The enemy had found them. Ryan sprang into action, barking orders to prepare the defenses. Haven 7's weapon systems were weak, barely enough to hold off even a small attack. Panic spread among the civilians as they scrambled to take cover. In the chaos, Elena turned to Ryan. "We need to activate the Reckoner. Now." Ryan shook his head. "We don't even know how to use it yet. We could make things worse. We don't have time to wait." Elena insisted. "If we don't try, we're dead anyway." Reluctantly, Ryan agreed. He ordered everyone to retreat to the safest part of the outpost, while Laura and Elena worked to unlock the crystal's secrets. As the first wave of Xetherian drones descended, the two women focused intently on the glowing core. Elena placed her hands on the containment unit, feeling the hum of energy beneath her palms. Images flashed in her mind again, this time showing her fragments of instructions, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. "I think I can do it," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her chest. "But I'll need your help." Laura nodded, her hands flying across the control panel. Together, they initiated the activation sequence. The crystal flared brightly, its light filling the room. Outside, the Xetherian forces paused, their sensors detecting the sudden surge of energy. For a moment, everything seemed to hold its breath. Then the ground beneath them trembled, and the air crackled with electricity. The Reckoner was waking up, and no one knew what would happen next. The team landed on the moon where the ruins had been discovered, their ship kicking up clouds of gray dust as it touched down. The air was thin and cold, and the landscape stretched out endlessly, barren and lifeless. Ryan stepped out first, his boots crunching against the rocky ground. Behind him, Elena Morales adjusted her gear, her eyes scanning the horizon with a mix of curiosity and unease. Laura had stayed behind at Haven 7, but she was watching everything through cameras mounted on the team's suits. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered one of the engineers, Daniel, as he helped unload equipment. "Feels like we're walking into a graveyard." Elena didn't respond. Her attention was already drawn to the ruins rising in the distance, jagged stone structures that looked like they'd been carved by giants. Some of the walls were crumbling, but others still stood tall, covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly under the dim light of the distant sun. She approached the nearest wall, running her gloved fingers over the carvings. They were unlike anything she'd seen before, yet something about them felt familiar, as if they called out to her from deep within her memory. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a series of markings. "These aren't just random shapes. They're instructions, warnings, maybe. I think they're telling us how to find whatever this Reckoner is." Ryan moved closer, peering over her shoulder. "Can you read it?" "Not all of it," Elena admitted. "But there are patterns here. If I can piece them together, we might be able to figure out where to go next." For hours, the team worked to document the carvings, taking photos and recording every detail. The deeper they explored, the more intricate the symbols became. Some seemed to describe the creation of the Reckoner itself, showing images of humans working with tools far beyond what their ancestors should have possessed. Others hinted at its power, waves of energy tearing apart ships, planets cracking under unseen forces. But there were also warnings, repeated over and over. Asterisk use with caution. The cost will be great asterisk. As the day wore on, Alina grew quieter, her brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, she pointed to a section of the wall near the back of the ruins. "This is it," she said. "This is the key. It's some kind of map, leading to another chamber underground." Ryan nodded. "Let's check it out." They followed the map's directions, descending into a narrow tunnel that twisted downward into darkness. The air grew colder, and the faint hum of machinery echoed around them. At the end of the tunnel, they found a massive door made of an alien metal that shimmered like liquid silver. In the center of the door was a panel covered in the same glowing symbols they'd seen above. "It's a puzzle," Alina said, her voice tinged with excitement. "We need to solve it to open the door." Dangle groaned. "Of course it is. Nothing's ever easy, is it?" Alina ignored him, focusing intently on the symbols. Slowly, she began pressing them in a specific sequence, guided by fragments of text she'd translated earlier. Each press caused the door to vibrate slightly, as if it were testing her choices. After several tense minutes, the door slid open with a low rumble, revealing a cavernous room bathed in soft blue light. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and atop it rested a crystal unlike anything they'd ever seen. It pulsed with energy, casting shifting patterns across the walls. The air around it crackled, making the hairs on their arms stand up. "That's it," Alina whispered. "That's the core of the Reckoner." Ryan stepped forward cautiously. "Are you sure? What happens if we take it?" "I don't know," Alina admitted. "But if this really is the weapon we've been looking for, we can't leave it here." Before anyone could stop her, she reached out and grabbed the crystal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a surge of energy shot through the room, knocking everyone off their feet. Alina cried out as visions flooded her mind. Images of war, destruction, and people screaming in agony. She saw flashes of Earth centuries ago, cities burning, skies darkened by ash. And then she heard a voice, deep and resonant, speaking directly to her. Asterisk, the Reckoner does not forgive. The Reckoner does not forget asterisk. When the vision faded, Alina lay gasping on the floor, clutching the crystal tightly. Ryan rushed to her side, concern etched on his face. "What happened? Are you okay?" She nodded weakly, though her hands trembled. "I'm fine, but we need to get this back to Haven 7. Now." Unbeknownst to them, their actions had not gone unnoticed. Far away, aboard the Exitherian flagship, alarms began to blare. Sensors had detected the activation of the crystal, and the Empire's leaders knew exactly what it meant. The hunt for the Reckoner, and the humans who dared to wield it, had begun. The galaxy was on the edge of disaster. For years, the Exitherian Empire had spread its control across star systems, crushing anyone who stood in its way. Their power came from something no one could break: the quantum aegis. It was a massive energy shield that surrounded their capital ship, making it untouchable. No weapon, no matter how advanced, could pierce through it. Humanity, once proud and strong, now found itself cornered. Led by Commander Ryan Carter and Chief Engineer Laura Bennett, what was left of humanity clung to survival in a small outpost called Haven 7. Haven 7 was far from Earth, hidden on the edge of a dying star system. It wasn't much, just a collection of domes and tunnels carved into a barren moon. But it was all that remained. The people there lived in fear, knowing that if the Exitherians ever found them, it would mean the end. Every day, scouts scanned the skies for signs of enemy ships. Every night, engineers worked tirelessly to improve their weak defenses. But everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. If the Exitherians came, Haven 7 would fall. One evening, As Ryan walked through the dimly lit corridors of the outpost, he received an urgent message. A team exploring a nearby moon had discovered something strange. Ancient ruins buried beneath layers of dust and rock. At first, it seemed like just another relic of some forgotten civilization. But then they found carvings, symbols etched into stone that looked eerily human. The team sent back images, and when Laura saw them, her heart raced. She recognized patterns similar to old Earth languages, ones that hadn't been used in centuries. "They're talking about a weapon," Laura said later, showing Ryan the translated text. Her voice trembled with both excitement and fear. "It's called the Reckoner. From what I can tell, it was created during humanity's early days in space. They describe it as unstoppable." Ryan frowned. "If it's so powerful, why didn't we use it before? Why did we let ourselves get pushed this far?" Laura hesitated. "Because it's dangerous." The notes mentioned side effects. Things like tearing apart space or rewriting reality. Whoever made it decided it was too risky to keep around. They dismantled it, or at least tried to. Ryan leaned back in his chair, thinking hard. The Exetherians were growing bolder. Reports of attacks on neighboring colonies came in almost daily. Sooner or later, they'd find Haven 7. And when they did, the outpost's feeble defenses wouldn't stand a chance against the quantum aegis. Desperation clawed at him. Was this mysterious weapon their only hope? "We need to know more," Ryan finally said. "Send a team to investigate further. If there's even a chance this Reckoner exists, we have to find it." Laura nodded but looked uneasy. "Be careful, Ryan. This isn't just about beating the Exetherians. If we're not careful, we might destroy ourselves trying." Ryan dismissed her concerns. There was no time for caution. He assembled a group of trusted individuals, including Elena Morels, a linguist skilled in decoding ancient texts. Together, they prepared to leave for the moon where the ruins lay. As their ship lifted off, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something much bigger than themselves. Back at Haven 7, life went on as usual, or as usual as it could be under constant threat. People whispered about the ruins and the weapon, some hopeful, others terrified. Laura stayed glued to her workstation, analyzing every scrap of data sent back by the team. She couldn't shake the warnings she'd read in the carvings. Whatever the Reckoner was, it wasn't meant to be used lightly. Meanwhile, light years away, the Exetherians continued their relentless march toward domination. Unaware of the discovery on the distant moon, they plotted their next move, a final strike to wipe out the last remnants of humanity. Time was running out, and the fate of billions rested on whether Ryan's team could uncover the truth about the galaxy's deadliest secret.